Hi, and welcome to the fourth video in my series for tarot beginners. Today we're going to be talking about how to know when you're in over your head during a tarot reading. I feel particularly qualified to do this video because I'm also a licensed psychotherapist, so I have a really good handle on the ethical issues surrounding how to know when you're in or outside of your scope of practice as a tarot reader. I'm also going to put in a disclaimer that if you are in a sticky situation, you may want to consider seeking legal advice. This video should not be construed as that, since I am not actually a lawyer. So yeah, if you are in a situation where you really don't know what to do, please go and seek the appropriate consultation. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what does a tarot reader do? So, I mean, obviously it's not a profession that's licensed, so there's no centralized code of ethics or rules and regulations about our work. But that doesn't mean that there's not ethical principles that we should individually be considering as we're approaching our clients. So when I think about what it is I can offer strictly as a tarot reader, so taking out my therapy credentials, I offer, spiritual exploration. I can offer guidance on making day-to-day decisions. I can help people with grief and loss. I can help people moving towards wellness. I can help them to be more mindful. I can provide them with clarity on issues going on in their life. So there's a lot that I can do, but the key thread through all of those is that I'm not providing treatment for a mental health issue, right? All of those things that I mentioned are things that are more in the realm of spirituality or in what we would call emotional wellness, right? So this isn't someone necessarily that is coming to me for a clinical disorder. They want to make their life better. They want to become more emotionally intelligent, right? So we're working on the positive psychology end of things rather than on the pathology end of things. It's not to say that tarot can't provide assistance to someone who's experiencing a mental illness or a severe trauma. But as a tarot reader, you have to be really careful not to advertise services that you're not qualified to provide or that you could be legally liable for if you say that you're doing, but you're not licensed to do. So it's important to know what it is that you're offering. So today I'm going to go through 5 points on how to know when you're in over your head and what to do about it. The first thing is to trust your gut. You are probably a tarot reader because you have really good intuition, so use it. If you're in a situation with a client and it isn't feeling right and you feel in over your head, there's a good chance you are. So pay attention to that little voice. And this goes back to advertising services accurately. So if you are really upfront ahead of time about what you can and can't do, you're less likely to get clients who are trying to get something from you that you can't actually give them. So for instance, if you are not psychic or you do not have skills as a medium, don't advertise that. Don't say oh, I can channel the spirits of your dead relatives if you don't actually feel like you can do that. If you're not a licensed psychotherapist, don't advertise, I can treat your depression, right? So it's important to say, this is what I can offer, this is who I am, and then that gives the client a chance before the reading even starts to line up what it is they want with what you can offer. So this is the foundation, right? Trusting your gut is the very most basic thing that you can do. It will serve you well. So keep that in mind as we go through these other 4 items, that trusting your gut will assist you in each of these. The second one is, don't give legal or medical advice unless you're also a lawyer or a doctor or a physician's assistant and you're authorized, you're allowed through your licensure to do those things. Just stay away from it. If a client comes and says, is my cancer going to be cured, or am I going to win this court case? You can be like, sorry, can't help you. Go see a lawyer, go see a doctor. It's always okay to tell a client, no, that's not something that I provide. And a lot of tarot readers, myself included, I put up on my website, I do not provide advice relating to legal matters or relating to financial matters or to medical matters. That is not what I do. Those are some of the areas where you would open yourself up to huge legal liabilities, and could also potentially run into trouble for practicing medicine or practicing law without a license, and those are really serious matters. If a client makes it into a reading and is really pushing you to address something like that, it's okay to be really explicit with them and to say, I'm not qualified to provide you with that advice. Here are some referrals, or here's who I think you should go talk to. It is okay to tell someone like, that is not something I can do for you. This brings me to my third point, which is to refer. Having the ability to refer out clients in any profession is like the greatest gift ever. This happens to me all the time as a therapist, where I get someone, they say, oh my God, my friend, or I have this child and we want you to do child therapy. And I say, I'm flattered. I don't do child therapy. Here's the name of some really great child therapists, right? So you have to know what you're good at, know what your strengths are, and then for pretty much everything else, just refer out, right? Because if you want to offer the best that you have to give, you can really hone in on, okay, this is what I can give you, and then the rest of it, it's like, oh, well, I know these other people that are really fantastic at that, right? That is okay, so if someone came to me and said, I want someone to, channel the spirits of my ancestors, I'd say, I've got a great person I can refer you to, but that's not something I do. So it's important to know your strengths, and then outside of that, be like, all right, here's my list of peeps, here's my go-to referral sources. There is no shame in referring out. It's really the sign of a competent, skilled professional when they know their limits, when they know their strengths, and then when they know who to connect someone else to, right? Because, chances are that person is coming to you because they don't know how to find that person that they really need. And so if you are able to link them up with a service that would benefit them, you are actually really helping them out. You're doing something that they weren't able to do for themselves because they tried to find what they needed and they ended up with you instead. And so you can really be a consummate professional by referring people out, right? I think sometimes there's this fear of I don't want to admit that I'm not good at something, but that's actually really a strength to know yep, no, this is not the thing that I'm really going to shine in. So point number 4 is about my area of expertise, which is mental health and trauma. Right? So this is something that's going to come up because issues of mental health and trauma affect so many people in our world right now. It's such a huge issue. So there's a good chance that you're going to see this a lot as a tarot reader. It's not to say that you can't take on clients that have mental illnesses, but if someone has acute, untreated mental illness or trauma-related symptoms, and they're coming to you as the first line, that is not okay, right? You are not likely equipped as a tarot reader alone, right, to handle that, right? That's extremely dangerous both for you and for them. Don't do it. Refer them out. So in mental health, when we're looking at a crisis, right, usually we're looking at one of 3 different things, or, multiple at once. So we might have someone that's having suicidal thoughts, so they're considering ending their life. We might have someone who is having homicidal thoughts, so they're considering ending someone else's life. And then we might have someone who's experiencing what we call psychosis, so potentially auditory visual hallucinations, delusions, things like that, right? Their ability to test reality, their experience of the world is really overwhelming and potentially distorted in some aspects. And so if someone is experiencing one of those 3 phenomena, there's a good chance that they need way more help than you can give them. So in every part of the US and in most countries, there's a service called a crisis line, right? And so a lot of times we refer to them as suicide hotlines. But a crisis line is actually really, meant to be used broadly. So it's not just for if you're suicidal, it's meant if you're having any type of mental health crisis that involves safety. It's a place that you can call and talk to folks that can connect you to resources in your area. So I would advise that you find out in your area or a national hotline, some place that you can have folks call, or that you can also call for consultation if you end up with someone who is suicidal, homicidal, or psychotic. And you don't need to know how to assess for safety, or how to know if it's really a true crisis or not, right? If you're not sure, if it feels like safety is on the line, go ahead and make that call, right? Either have the person call the crisis line or call them yourself and explain what's going on and ask them what they think you should do. That's a great resource. It's free. Those crisis lines are open 24/7, every day of the year, holidays included. So make use of that resource. And if you need help looking up crisis lines in your area, comment below and I'm sure that I can help you out with that. So another resource that you can use if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis is your local emergency room. And now I know emergency rooms sometimes get a little bit, they're like, oh, we don't want all the psych crises, but they are kind of like the last resort where like, if you're really just like, I don't know if I can handle this, I don't feel safe, go to your nearest ER and ask them for what's called a crisis evaluation. That person would then be seen by like a social worker or a psychiatrist or someone, usually a social worker, and they would do the job of assessing the risk to decide, does this person need to be hospitalized? Is something going on? So that is also an option. Another option is ask this client or this potential client, do you currently have a therapist? Can we talk to them? Will you talk to them, right? Connect them to the resources that they already have. Is there a friend that you trust that we can call that can help you get to a safe place, right? So make use of that person's support network as much as possible, because it's always great, when you're in crisis to be connected to resources that feel comfortable and familiar. And the most last resort out there is the police, and I generally am hesitant to use this resource for many political reasons. However, especially in cases where someone might be like homicidal or is violent or is attacking someone, it may become necessary to call the police in those instances for safety purposes. But hopefully we're able to help someone get to resources before it escalates to that level of severity. When it comes to suicidal thoughts or homicidal thoughts, things to look out for, because lots of people have thoughts, and thoughts don't necessarily mean that someone is at risk. But especially if someone's like talking about, how they might kill themselves or someone else, when they might do it, that's like, wee, 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 neon warning sign, like that person needs to get connected to help right away, versus if someone says like, oh, well, I thought about killing myself, once 20 years ago, right? That's not happening right now. That's really different. Regardless, since you're not necessarily qualified to sort out levels of risk, go ahead and consult someone who is, send them to someone who can assess them. But just so it's okay to talk about suicidal thoughts. It's okay to ask someone like, hey, I'm kind of worried about you. Have you had any thoughts of ending your life? That's not going to make someone kill themselves. There's a lot of myths out there about talking about suicide. So feel comfortable to show someone support, to show them empathy, to ask them questions, and to send them to the appropriate resource. You may also want to compile, lists of therapists you trust in the area, psychiatrists, other professionals that can treat mental illness and or trauma-related symptoms. Another issue that could come up is domestic violence. And again, this is a super tricky issue. There may be domestic violence hotlines or shelters in your area. You may want to learn where those resources are so that if someone comes to you and is struggling with that, you can refer them to the professionals that are able to offer help. It's helpful in general just to be non-judgmental, right, with any of these things, whether it's mental illness, domestic violence, trauma, any of that stuff. Be supportive and be firm about saying like, I want you to get the help you need. Here's someplace you can go to get it. Another issue that can come up, and it's different state to state, is when you as a third party hear about like child abuse, elder abuse, abuse of vulnerable adults. Many states have mandated reporter laws, meaning that if a client tells you about, my husband is abusing my children, right? Like you may be obligated under state law to report that to Child Protective Services. And so it's important as someone who works with people to know the laws in your state, and to know too, like if you are doing online tarot readings, like and something comes up, like knowing the laws in the jurisdiction, because essentially like say that you live in Alabama, but this client you're talking to lives in Ottawa, Canada, right? If this situation comes up, you would need to consult the laws for Ottawa, Canada to find out if you have a legal obligation. And you may want to decide too, like as your own ethical guidelines go, like how do you feel about that? Do you feel like, regardless of state law, are you going to make a report about that? That's something to figure out beforehand, I think, hopefully. And for me, because of my licensure, I'm generally obligated no matter where I hear about something. If it's in my regular work or in some other setting, I'm still mandated to make reports about those things. So then it's important for me to be upfront with clients about that as well. Obviously, dealing with, mental illness, trauma, domestic violence, abuse, all of those things are really complicated. And the best way to uncomplicate it is to refer. I know I've said that like 10 million times, but it's true. If you don't know what to do, if you aren't trained in that area, refer, refer, refer. Area number 5 is about boundary pushers. So we've probably all had this person, they email and they're like, I need a reading right away. Like, why can't you read for me right now? Or, someone keeps asking the same question over and over again, or they're being creepy or weird, and they're pushing the envelope in some way that is inappropriate, not fun for you. And so with those folks, right, it's important to honor your gut instinct. If someone is making you feel uncomfortable, that's not okay, right? And you are allowed to honor that impulse of like, ew, this doesn't feel so good. And to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't want to take you on as a client, or I'm sorry, I'm going to stop this reading and refund you your money. Like whatever you have to do is okay. Like you are never obligated to read for anyone ever, for any reason. In my experience, if you are really upfront about what you offer, if you make it clear that you hold boundaries, you're a lot less likely to get inundated with these kinds of folks. Typically, if you're really firm with folks, the folks that are going to be like weird about it usually kind of get filtered out on the front end. It can also be helpful to practice beforehand, what it is that you might say to someone in those different kinds of situations. If someone is sexually harassing you, what might you say? Like, if someone's making inappropriate comments, I might say, those comments make me feel very uncomfortable. If you continue to make those comments, I will discontinue this reading, or I will block you, or whatever it is. I think it's important to just allow those boundaries to protect you. This is also why I like to have policies on my website about turnaround for readings. So, if I have it written up there, like, okay, if you get an email reading, I will get that back to you within 7 days of you submitting it, right? Then if somebody like messages me as like, oh my God, I need a reading right now. I'm like, okay, I hear that you're, suffering, and this is my policy. I'll get this to you within 7 days. If you aren't satisfied with that time frame, I'm happy to give you a refund. The more that you work with people, the more you will get a sense of where your boundaries are, and that makes it easier to enforce them because you start to see it coming earlier on, right? I think when you're new, these things kind of sneak up on you and get you out of the blue, but over time, you'll see more of the warning signs. You'll get a feeling in your gut like, oh, this doesn't feel good, and you will be more successful at fending off folks that are going to push your boundaries. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that I think if you're someone who is empathic, if you're someone who is caring, that you have to be some kind of doormat, right? So the other day I was going to the gym, I had parked my car and I was changing my shoes and I had my car door open, and a man approached my car and asked if I could do him a favor. And I said, maybe, tell me what's going on. And he asked me if I would drive him in my car with him to a location, maybe like a mile away, because he had lost his phone there and he needed to get it back. And I sat there kind of being like, well, if I were in that situation, like I'd want help getting my phone back, and I don't feel at all comfortable letting a strange man into my car with me while I'm driving alone, that's super, super dangerous, right? Like if you're alone in a car with someone, like they could attack you, they could cause an accident by like trying to take the steering wheel away from you, right? Like it's bad news bears. Like if you think someone might try to murder you, like getting in a car with them is the last thing you want to do, and I felt for him. I could see that he was in distress. I don't know what it was about exactly. I even offered him, I said, you know, what I will do if you'd like me to is I'll drive down to where you're saying your phone is and I'll go look for it. And if I find it, I'll bring it back for you. But I don't feel comfortable letting you in my car. I'm sorry. And he, you know, stormed off in a huff, refused, said, you know, I don't know. And you know, I wish the best for him. And guess what? Like, I had to keep my boundary in that situation. I had a gut feeling saying, this is not a good idea. Don't do it. And I went with it, you know, and that doesn't make me mean. That doesn't make me uncaring. It means that I am taking care of myself, that I'm being smart with my boundaries. So to sum it up, having boundaries doesn't mean that you're mean. It means that you're smart and that you care about yourself. So to summarize, right, trust your gut. That is number one. Always, always honor your intuition. Number two, don't give legal or medical advice. Just don't do it. Number three, refer all the time when you don't know what's going on. Number four, when dealing with mental health and trauma, refer to other people. Use your local resources like a crisis line. If there's safety on the line, definitely get them connected to the appropriate resource. Number five, don't be afraid to set boundaries. You're allowed to say what you want to do and not do. I hope this video was helpful. If you have more questions about how to know when you're in over your head, please let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe. We'll see you next time.